Hey y'all, it's Jennifer. Welcome back to my channel. Today, I am coming to you with a video where we look back on 2023 and we see if we achieved our goals. I feel like I did fairly decent on my goals this year. I did a mid-year check-in back in June and I felt okay about things then. And then I even set a few extra goals for this back half of the year. So I just wanted to look back at the year and see how I did on my goals. I always say that my goals are very fluid. If I don't get to them, it's really not a big deal and I don't necessarily care. I'm really just setting these goals to have fun. And if I don't get around to certain things, that doesn't necessarily bother me. So I don't feel that stressed about not achieving them. But if I don't achieve any of them, I kind of have to question whether I should have goals at all in the next year. But I personally feel like I did decent on these. So I have my planner here, I have my list of goals, and I thought we could go over them. One of the big goals I had was actually a really big success for me this year, and it was achieved. I'm really, really proud of myself. One of my big goals was to kind of streamline my bookshelves. I wanted to unhaul a lot. I wanted to get new bookshelves in my bedroom specifically so that I could have kind of a nice, iconic booktuber setup. And I achieved that. That was really going on about halfway through the year. I overhauled every bookshelf that I had, and then I got 3 new bookshelves for a total of 4. And I feel really great about that because it's a level of organization that I have never seen in the time that I have had a booktube channel. And I've always wanted that. And I think I've held off on it because it just has never seemed like there was really the space to have a true library, to have a true set of bookshelves. And so when I just decided that I was going to suck it up, I was going to move some things around and sacrifice some space, I was really happy with what happened. I don't really tend to film up there that much though. It's definitely more of a vlogging space. And so I would really like in the new year to kind of do up the space in terms of a filming area. I would like a nice chair there. I would like some better lighting. That's definitely the key, and that's definitely the hardship about this time of year when it gets dark really early. The lighting in that area is affected very early on, so there's really only a good hour or so of perfect lighting in there naturally. So it's not really been a space that I have filmed a great deal in, so that's kind of the unfortunate side of it, but I still want to count it as a big success because I definitely feel more organized. My goal was to have 1 TBR shelf, and that was definitely achieved. The only other disappointing thing about it is that I clearly do not actually have as much space as what I thought. I thought getting those bookshelves was going to create a lot of space for me. And I thought when I got them, I was going to miraculously have all of this extra shelving. And so I thought it was going to be a great time to bring in more books, to have a book haul. And I don't have enough space on those shelves for all of the books that I have currently. And so because there actually isn't enough space on the shelves, I'm back to doing exactly what I was doing prior to having them, which is leaving stacks of books around. And that was really the ultimate goal of getting the shelves, was so that that wouldn't happen. So while I do definitely feel more organized, I still feel like a lot of work needs to be done, but those are shelves that are very flexible because I think I'm going to be able to add in an extra shelf towards the bottom, and that's a big goal in the new year, is to get that done. I don't think that's going to miraculously make more space, but it's still going to give me more than what I currently have. But I thought we could start out this video with a success because that was really the biggest goal. And I think it would have been the hardest goal to accomplish, quite frankly, because it took money and it took time and it really took a lot of physical effort to go through those books. And so I personally am really glad that I did that. This was a major success for me. Next, let's talk about a failure. And I feel like this is always the failure every year when I look back at the year in terms of goals. I did set myself a list of books that I wanted to get to in 2023, and I had a theme for the year. I wanted it to be ancient classics. Here's the thing. I think I did wind up reading more ancient classics than I would have if I did not set this goal. But at the same time, this was just a waste of my time, quite frankly, because I really did not read as many as what I anticipated. And I'll be honest, I think the book lists for me in terms of classics are things that I'm going to do away with because I never stick to them. And I also think those lists function in a way for me as just an encouragement. They're not necessarily a list of books that I'm going to be disappointed or mad if I don't get to them. It's just to encourage me to pick up more than I normally would. And I'll be real, I am at the end of my so-called bucket list of books, let's say. When I first got onto booktube, I was really encouraged to get back into classics after having been out of university, basically because there were so many big ones and famous names that we never covered in school. And so that was my ultimate goal, was to read those. And I'll be frank with you, I've done that, especially now that I have finished the Brothers Karamazov. Everything that was on my so-called bucket list of books, the big name classics, that's over for me. I have at least attempted the big ones. And so I don't really feel the need to keep on making lists like this. I also don't see the need to make lists like this anymore because I'm just not a big classics reader anymore. And I think that was the unfortunate thing about this, is that a lot of the ancient classics I had listed were things I wanted to reread. I'm also just not very big on rereading anymore. And so this was a failure on multiple different levels. I will say I did set this goal only for the first 6 months of the year. That was another big goal that I had, was just to set goals for that first 6 months and then check in midway through the year, see how I'm doing, and then I could decide if I wanted to carry on. And I didn't decide to carry on with ancient classics, and I'm glad, because I've not read any. But this is something I'm glad I did. I'm glad I set this goal, because I did wonder about it at the beginning of the year, because last year and this year have not been big classics years for me at all. And I just kind of think I'm moving away from them. And so I think making those goals is just not conducive to a good reading year for me, because I think that's a goal that would be more stressful to me. And that's definitely the way this felt, because I felt like I had made a list of books that then people were going to expect me to review or to revisit or to talk about at some length, and it just never happened. And it's not to say that I'm not going to read any more ancient classics or that I won't read classics at all anymore. They're just not a large part of my reading. And so that was something that I really wanted to accept about myself when I looked back at this goal, because I kind of forgot about it, totally and completely forgot about it. And I could not tell you a single book that was on the list this year. So this was a failure, and I think it has made me reflect on making this goal, or making a classics goal at all, in the new year. I don't necessarily think it's a good idea. Another goal that I had is, of course, a goal that I think most of us make here on BookTube every year, and that was to kind of be on a no-buy or no-haul, not to bring any books in. And that was a goal I set for the first 6 months of the year, and then I also set it for this back half. I feel like I have done extraordinarily well on this, because when I look back at years past, particularly here on BookTube, when I can really look back and look at a list of books that I've brought in, when I can really see how many books that I have hauled, 2022 and 2023 have been low buy years for me. And I think that's been really great, but I will say, this year in particular, it was a low buy for me physically. But on ebook, I went kind of wild. And I think I want to reflect on that going into the new year, trying to think of new goals for the new year, that I really do not know whether I should say I want a no buy or just to read my shelves in general, if that should include e-reading. Really, the reason I have always said that I don't want to bring in more books is not necessarily a price thing, because I tend to get a lot of books used, and I tend to have only a handful of things that I'm really excited for, a handful of things that I'm going to pre-order. So really the reason that I set that goal is that I just don't have the space. I thought that coming into the halfway point of the year, when I revisited my goals, I thought I might could do away with it, because I was really excited about getting those new shelves. And I fully thought that when I got those new shelves, I was going to have a lot of space. And since that didn't really happen, since I wound up not having nearly as much space as I anticipated, I still kept kind of a low buy for the second half of the year in terms of physical books. But I know that I went wild on ebook. I read a lot of things on ebook, and particularly if I was really excited about them, I made the choice a lot of the time to go on and download them on Kindle. And I think that was really great. I've personally just really loved my Kindle since I got a new Kindle last year. I have just been genuinely obsessed with it. And so I feel like I've done well. The reason that I didn't want to bring in anything physically was because I didn't have the space for it. And because of that, buying a lot on Kindle has never really bothered me, because I don't see those books. That's not something that takes up physical space. So that has never been a concern to me. The problem is, I will say, Kindle books are so much more expensive. If you choose to buy anything full price on Kindle, oh my gosh, you're paying more sometimes than you are for the physical book. So I kind of hunt for the daily deals. That's what I'm really interested in. But sometimes I just kind of suck it up and I buy the book. The unfortunate side to that is you can't really unhaul an ebook like you can a physical book. So when you don't like something on Kindle, that's really where the disparity comes, because I can easily get rid of something that I have physically, but what am I going to do with something that's just taking up space on my Kindle? So I need to really reflect on that going into the new year, because I'm definitely going to say the same goal again, that I want to go on a low buy. I don't want to haul anything except for things that I know that I have pre-ordered. But I think I do need to have a long talk with myself about bringing in things on Kindle. That's been very dangerous, especially during readathons like Booktuber, where you can download a lot of classics for free. And so I feel like I have a larger TBR, quite frankly, on Kindle right now than I do physically. That can't possibly be true, but I still feel like I'm kind of overwhelmed by what is on Kindle. So that's probably something I need to think about for the new year. Talking about goals that I completely forgot about, apparently one of my big goals that I set at the beginning of the year was to read more translated works, because that was something that made up a big bulk of my reading life in 2022. And I actually think I really enjoyed it, because I think some of them wound up being my favorite books of the year. It was just great to read more translated fiction that was modern. This 100% has not happened. I'm going to call this a failure, because I can really count on one hand the amount of translated fiction that I have read this year. And not everything is going to be a success, that's fine, but I felt like I was putting this on a goals list because I knew I could achieve it. I felt like this was going to be a really easy goal to achieve, and quite frankly, I forgot all about it. That's a shame to me, again, because last year I just really enjoyed reading translated works. I don't know if this is a goal that I will fold over into the new year or not, but I definitely still want to think about it, because I really like reading from other countries. So I really do want to make a concerted effort to read more translated, especially modern fiction, because I feel like that's something that I forget about. And I also don't often see it talked about. So I really want to go out of my way and find things that are translated that are kind of newer releases. I think that would be really exciting, but I don't know if I'm going to keep it as a goal for next year. I also wanted to read more from favorite authors. In some ways, I'm going to say this was a successful goal. In some ways, I'm going to say it was a failure, because I really intended this because I wanted to read more from authors that I thought I considered new favorites last year. People like Herman Hesse and Stephanie Garber, I thought were new all-time favorite authors. Have not read a single book from either one of them this year. The reason I would say it is partially a success is because when I read a book this year by someone that I had never read from before, and I was really enjoying it, I wound up reading more from that author pretty automatically. So that was really another goal that I had that I think might have been unstated. I just did not want to read one book from an author and say, oh, they're a new all-time favorite. I wanted to make sure that I was reading more of their backlist. And I feel like this year I did that, especially when I think about series. I'm really bad about starting a series and saying, oh yeah, I'm really into this, and then never carrying on. I really tried to complete series this year, and I feel like I did really well on that. And I also would carry on with an author pretty quickly. If I read one book from them and I enjoyed it, I automatically looked into their backlist and tried to read something else from them. And so I do want to say I consider this goal to be a bit of a success, because this has helped me find new favorite authors this year, which has been really exciting. And last year, I feel like I only had a couple of standouts. So I want to say that I actually consider this to be a success. My Goodreads goal was 50, and I achieved that halfway through the year. When I did my goals check-in, I had hit 50 books. And so as of right now, we still have a couple of weeks left in the year. I have read 107 books. I'm really proud of myself. And this is so interesting because I made a very low goal list in 2022 because I read a lot of books in 2021. And I feel like 2021 is one of the most mediocre reading years I've ever had. So last year, I didn't want to read that many books. I felt like the numbers really just didn't mean anything, because it didn't necessarily mean that you read more great books. This year, I set a lower goal again with the full intent of doing what I did last year, but I have just really beat that goal. I have read a lot this year, and this is the best reading year I have had on BookTube. I have had more 5 stars this year than I have in years past. I think a lot of it is that I have kind of let go and just read what I enjoyed, read what I wanted to read. And I think that's meant that the channel has changed quite a bit, but I personally am really happy with that. I think I was forcing myself to read a variety of things, and I was forcing myself to read things that I didn't want to read just so that I would have something different to talk about or something that I thought certain segments of my audience were more interested in. This year I said you can't care about that because this is a hobby, and if you're not having fun, you're going to walk away from this. And so this year I've gone back to my roots. This has been a fantasy year, a fantasy romance year. I have had the time of my life reading this year. I feel like I've just had a more reinvigorated relationship with reading, but also with booktube. And so I am really happy that I have actually read over 100 books this year, because to me, it means that I actually wanted to read. I have really read things that excited me. And it kind of makes me rethink my feelings about 2021, where I felt like reading more books did not necessarily mean that I was reading more great ones. But this year, I definitely feel like I have. And honestly, I have read so many great books this year that I look back on 5 stars that I gave out in years past, just kind of shaking my head, like, what was going on with me? Why did I even think that was good? I think I'll probably keep the same number goal next year. 50 books is a really manageable goal, and it's very achievable because it's essentially a book a week, and I feel like I'll hit that definitely. So that's a goal that I like to keep, just because you don't know month to month what's going to be happening. You don't know when you're going to have time to read. So I think I'll keep 50 as my goal on Goodreads, but I am really pleased that I blew past that goal this year. This was definitely achieved. This was a very, very high success, because not only did I read more books than the goal, I read some really incredible books this year. Another goal I had at the beginning of the year kind of went hand in hand with having a book journal or a book planner, and we could just talk about that for 6 years, how I have gone through so many different iterations of what I want to do with kind of a booktube journal, because I definitely feel like I need one. I need a physical place to record stuff, because I am so much more physical and tactile than I am digital. I don't want everything I do to be digital. I don't want to write stuff in Google Docs. I need to do it physically. And I tried so many systems this year that really did not work for me. And so I'm still kind of up in the air about what I'm gonna do next year. And that's kind of crazy, because we're really staring down the first of the year. I thought I would do another book planner, and that was how I started out this year. I had a Hobonichi, and I started out with the Hobonichi system. And I'll tell you, on the one hand, the Hobonichi system works incredibly well for me, because I like to have a space to write something for every day, and I like to have kind of a creative space. I think that's really wonderful. But it means on certain days where you don't do anything, or even days where you're really busy, you have a lot of blank space because you didn't have time to update, or you didn't have anything worth writing down. You didn't have anything worth recording. And so about halfway through the year, I kind of gave up on the Hobonichi system. But one thing the Hobonichi system has that I really wanted to instrument, and that I really wanted to look back on and I wanted to use, they have a habit tracker at the front of their planners. And so there's a space for every day of the year. And one of my goals was to read every day and to scribble in that place, color in that place every day when I read something. This was one of the worst goals to have. It's one of the most unachievable goals to have, in my opinion. And it really put a lot of negative pressure on me to read. And so I would read maybe 1 or 2 pages just so I could color in that square, which is kind of ridiculous. And that was not necessarily what I intended to track. I really wanted to track substantial reading. And I'll be honest, that never happened. I mean, some days I read more than others, and some days when I scribbled in those boxes, I really had read a lot. I think on the one hand, this was still a helpful goal to have, because it let me look back and see times that were really high in terms of reading, times when I really got a lot of reading done. But it also let me know that there are certain times of the week specifically, and also certain times of the month, where I'm not getting any reading done at all. And that was kind of helpful to know, actually, because that really helps me think about planning out content, what I can do, because knowing that there are fluctuations throughout the month and throughout the year where I'm reading more or reading less, that kind of helps me think about what type of content I should be working on. So in some ways, I think this was kind of a great goal to have. And if I did it again, I would say it's just going to be more of a reading tracker than a goal to read every day. I think saying you want to read every day, that was the unhealthy thing, because that turned it into a chore and that turned it into a job. And that's something that I struggled with in 2022. That's kind of why I was making this goal this year. And I also struggled with reading functioning as a second job, and booktube specifically functioning as a second job. And in some ways it does, and in some ways you have to look at it that way in order for it to be successful, because you kind of have to put in some time. You have to put in some work, but I don't want it to feel like work to me. And so that's why I think this was kind of the wrong way to set this goal. I do think it's a good idea to track reading, but I don't necessarily think it's a great idea to say you want to read every day, because there are multiple days in the week where I don't read, period. And so I don't necessarily want to feel the pressure to do something that I'm not in the mood to do, because I think that's the way to get into a reading slump. I also wanted to DNF more. I feel like this is a goal that a lot of booktubers set, is to just feel more comfortable DNFing a book when you're not enjoying it. And I think I did really well on this, I'll be honest, because I am somebody who likes to DNF anyway. The problem with me is that I'll just say, I'm not in the mood for this right now. So I'll never admit to permanently DNFing a book. And so I really did that this year. I feel like a lot of the books that I DNF'd in 2023, I was pretty honest with myself about, and I admitted to myself that I'm probably not going to come back to them. This is a great goal to have. It's definitely a goal that will roll over into 2024 for me, because I think on BookTube, it's hard to say that you want to DNF anything, because I notice a lot of BookTubers and just a lot of people I know in real life, they never, ever DNF. They always finish the book. How are you living? So this is a goal I think I achieved, but it's a goal that I want to keep, because I still think I wait until kind of the last minute to DNF. I'll give a book a really long chance. I'm just not gonna do that anymore. If I know on page 20 that I am not feeling something, I'm going to give myself permission to DNF it. So I think this is a really great goal to have, because more of us should be DNFing. Why force yourself to sit through something that you know is bad, or that you know you're going to hate? And so that's definitely a great goal. I think this was semi-successful, and I'm going to roll it over into 2024. One of the big elephants in the room for me at the beginning of the year, and actually even midway through the year, was wrap-ups. I really did think at the end of last year that I was going to do away with wrapping up the month, period. And the interesting thing is, when I started the year, I felt like wrap-ups were of more interest to y'all than they were to me. They were videos that performed very, very well. I could tell that there were a lot of people who maybe only watch a wrap-up. And so I wanted to keep them at the beginning of the year for y'all. Then as the year kind of got up off the ground, wrap-ups performed more poorly, and I really wanted to do them. Kind of midway through the year, I thought they were really great resources for me to look back on the month and to look back on the year. And so I was going to keep them around basically for me, even though I didn't think they were performing that well. Sometime after July, I just stopped doing wrap-ups, period. And you know, there wasn't really a specific reason for that. I did not do it intentionally. I think I really just stopped doing them because I started to pre-film quite a bit in August. And so it was really hard to find somewhere to slot them in the video schedule, or to put them up at a time that was appropriate in the month. And so that's why I stopped doing them. But I recently did a wrap up. I recently did a mid-month wrap up. And you know, I'm gonna say I still find them really, really useful to me personally. And I don't know why I felt like at the beginning of the year, they weren't something that I wanted to do, because I actually think alongside vlogs that a wrap up is probably the most useful video to me personally when I go back and rewatch my own stuff, because it's nice to know how you felt about a book kind of immediately after finishing it. The only thing I'll say is that when months go by where I have vlogged a lot, doing a wrap up just feels kind of repetitive, kind of needless, let's say, because I honestly feel like I have talked about the book in multiple places by the time the end of the month rolls around. So sometimes maybe when there are months that I have vlogged a lot, maybe I won't do a wrap up that month, but I feel like I haven't vlogged a lot in December, so it was kind of useful to do a mid-month wrap up. I'm gonna go on and call it right now and say that I'm going to keep them around, just because I do think they're kind of useful. They function in a similar way to a book journal, and I think that's why book journals in general have been hard for me, because if I do it online, I don't feel the need to write it down elsewhere. And I think that's kind of the best thing about a wrap-up. I feel like a wrap-up really does function like a book journal for me, where I talk about everything after it is completed. So the value in the vlog is kind of talking about the book as it's ongoing. but the value in the wrap up is your final thoughts. So I feel like I'm going to keep those around. Halfway through the year, I also set some goals, and these were very minimal, and I achieved them. One of the main goals that I had was no more readathons. I really did not want to overcommit myself because the readathons that I participated in the first half of the year, I never finished anything for. They weren't successful for me, and I felt like that was disappointing. And so I really just didn't want to be involved in readathons because of that, because I felt like I really could not commit to anything. The only readathon I ever did anything for in the back half of the year was, of course, Victober. And I'll be honest, I failed that too. I read maybe 2 things for Victober this year, and I think I read them actually before the month. So this is still something that I feel kind of positively about. I feel like I probably should not agree to do any readathons in the new year because clearly this is something that I cannot keep to. I've always struggled to keep to a TBR, but I feel like since I am a mood reader, when a readathon rolls around, I can get excited about it, but if I'm not in the mood for that particular theme at the time, then I am not going to achieve anything. It's not going to be a positive outcome. And so I think I'm going to say this is a goal I'll keep for the new year. I think it was really great, and I think it made me feel more relaxed in the back half of the year than I normally do, because normally there's just so much going on and you feel like you want to participate in all of these things. And that's the unfortunate thing, is feeling like you didn't really participate in anything. But at the same time, I feel bad when I participate and I don't achieve anything, because I feel like it's kind of false advertising when you post a TBR for a readathon and then you don't read anything on that TBR. You don't wind up reading for the readathon period. That is what happened to me in the first 6 months of the year. So I think this was a really great goal to have, and I definitely achieved it. I feel like it really made me relax in the back half of the year, and that was kind of the ultimate goal of setting this as a goal, was just to feel more relaxed. Another major goal that I set for the second half of the year was just to accept my changing reading tastes. I talked about this a little bit at the beginning of the video. I have definitely gone through some reading changes over the past couple of years specifically. And I think that's hard when you're on BookTube, because I feel like maybe on any community in BookTube, people want to slot you into a certain side of the community. And I never have felt like I fit on any particular side of the community in BookTube, because I think I read a wide variety of genres. I know I mostly read fantasy, but I don't feel like a fantasy booktuber at all. And it was hard for me to think about my reading tastes changing midway through the year, because I felt like that meant the channel was going to not be as successful, that people weren't going to be as into the channel anymore if I admitted to the fact that I'm not as into classics anymore, for example, and that I'm really into stuff like literary fiction when I never thought that I would be. And so that was hard for me, because I felt like it would mean that the channel was changing in a way that might be negative to some people. But if it's positive to me, I feel like that means the channel's changes will also be positive. So I just really wanted to accept this about myself. That was the ultimate goal. It was just to accept that my reading tastes were changing, and to also kind of give myself permission to read more freely and to read what I was really excited about, to just read what I was interested in and not feel like I had to read certain things just to put up videos that I thought might be more successful than others. So this was a really wonderful goal. I think this was the most positive goal that I set all year, and I want to kind of set it for next year. I want to kind of anticipate future reading changes, because I have evolved a lot on BookTube, and I think that's probably going to continue to change as I continue to age. And so I kind of want to preemptively say that I'm going to accept that about myself. So this was a really wonderful goal to have. The last goal that I wanted to talk about was just how I wanted to celebrate my 5-year anniversary on BookTube. And I had so many ideas here. I wanted to read books that y'all recommended. 100% that didn't happen. But I also just wanted to do kind of a Q&A and talk about behind the scenes of BookTube a little bit. And I did that, and that's one of my most successful videos of the year, and I'm really glad that y'all responded to it so positively, because I felt like it was just an opportunity to have a really open and honest conversation about this platform and about my time here specifically. And so it was really wonderful to get to talk about that with y'all. I feel like I honored the 5-year anniversary in a really great way, and I hope it means that I'll be here for 5 more years. I hope we can celebrate my 10-year anniversary on BookTube here. So that was a goal that was achieved. I wanted to do something to mark that occasion because it felt very monumental to me. I've never really stuck with anything this long in terms of a hobby, and so I really did want to do something to celebrate that, and I'm glad that I did. So those were all of my goals for 2023. I actually feel like I achieved quite a few of these, and so I feel good about setting goals going into next year, but I would love to know your thoughts on these down below. I would love to know if you set any goals, how did you do on them? But that's going to be all for me today. I hope you're all having a great week. Happy reading. Goodbye.